September 15, 1943, 200 feet above occupied France. The engine of the small Lysander aircraft barely whispered through the night sky. Inside the cramped cockpit, 26-year-old British pilot Mary Wilkins gripped the control stick with steady hands. Behind her, 3 French resistance fighters sat in complete darkness. They didn't know where they were going, they didn't know how they'd land, and they definitely didn't know their pilot was a woman. Mary checked her watch. 3 minutes to the drop zone. Below, Nazi patrols searched the countryside with spotlights. One wrong move and they'd all be dead or worse. Captured. The Gestapo didn't take prisoners on missions like this. They took names, addresses, family members. But Mary had been here before, 73 times before, to be exact, and she'd never lost an agent, never been spotted, never even been shot at. Tonight was different though. German intelligence knew someone was dropping agents into France. They just didn't know who, or when, or where. They'd set up a trap. Extra patrols, fake landing zones, radio intercepts, everything designed to catch the mysterious pilot of the resistance called the Ghost. What they didn't know was that the Ghost was about to land right under their noses. Again. Mary pushed the stick forward. The Lysander dropped like a stone toward a tiny field surrounded by German positions. This wasn't just another mission. This was personal. One of the agents behind her was her childhood friend. If she failed tonight, he'd die. If she succeeded, she'd complete her 74th impossible landing. And if you think that's crazy, stick around because by the end of the war, Mary Wilkins would fly this exact mission 200 times. 200 trips behind enemy lines. 200 landings in occupied territory. 200 takeoffs with Nazis hunting her. And she'd never get caught. Not even once. This is the story of the most successful covert pilot in World War II. A woman who wasn't supposed to fly combat missions. A woman whose name was erased from history books. A woman who saved hundreds of lives and never asked for credit. Before we dive into how she did the impossible, hit that subscribe button because we're bringing you the untold stories of World War II heroes like Mary that changed history but never made the headlines. Now, let's find out how one pilot became a ghost. Mary Wilkins wasn't supposed to be flying anything, let alone secret missions into Nazi-occupied Europe. She grew up in a small village in Yorkshire, England. Her father was a mechanic. Her mother was a school teacher. They had enough money to get by but not much more. When Mary was 16, she saw an airplane for the first time at a county fair. A barnstormer was giving rides for 2 shillings. She spent her entire month's savings for 5 minutes in the air. 5 minutes that changed her life forever. By 1938, Mary had saved enough money for flying lessons. Her instructor told her women couldn't be pilots. She proved him wrong in 6 weeks. She earned her license faster than any student he'd ever taught, male or female. But when war broke out in 1939, the Royal Air Force said no women in combat roles, no exceptions. Mary could fly better than most RAF pilots. It didn't matter. She could navigate in the dark without instruments. It didn't matter. She could land on a field the size of a tennis court. Still didn't matter. The rules were clear. Women didn't fly combat missions. So Mary did something clever. She joined the Air Transport Auxiliary. The ATA was a civilian organization that delivered planes from factories to airfields. It was boring work, safe work, exactly what the military thought women should do. Mary flew Spitfires, Hurricanes, Lancasters, every type of aircraft the RAF had. She logged more flight hours in 6 months than most combat pilots did in a year. And she learned something important. She learned how to fly anything, anywhere, in any conditions. That skill would save her life over and over again. In early 1942, a man approached her after a delivery flight. He didn't give his name. He didn't wear a uniform. He just asked one question. Can you land a plane in the dark on a field you've never seen before with no lights and no radio? Mary said yes without thinking. The man smiled. Good. You start training Monday. Tell no one. Not your family. Not your friends. Not even other pilots. If you talk, people die. That man worked for the Special Operations Executive. The SOE was Churchill's secret army. Their job was simple. Cause chaos behind enemy lines. Drop agents into occupied countries. Supply the resistance. sabotaged Nazi operations. But they had a problem. Most pilots couldn't land in the tiny fields the resistance controlled. Most pilots couldn't fly low enough to avoid radar. Most pilots got nervous and made mistakes. Mary Wilkins didn't get nervous, and she never made mistakes. Her training lasted for weeks. They taught her how to read maps in complete darkness, how to navigate using stars and landmarks, how to identify German patrol patterns from the air, how to land without lights on fields barely longer than a football pitch, how to take off in under 30 seconds if Germans approached, and most importantly, how to disappear if she got shot down. The SOE gave her a fake identity, fake papers, fake everything. If the Nazis caught her, she was supposed to be a lost ferry pilot who got turned around. Nothing more. Her first mission was April 3, 1942. The target was a field near Amiens in northern France. The Germans controlled everything within 50 miles. Mary would fly a Westland Lysander, a small single-engine plane built for exactly this kind of work. It could take off and land in incredibly short distances. It could fly slow enough to land in tight spaces. And it was painted matte black so it was almost invisible at night. The Lysander could carry 3 passengers and had a range of about 600 miles, just enough to get to France and back. Mary's orders were simple. Drop 2 agents. Pick up 1. Don't get caught. She took off from RAF Tangmere on the southern coast of England at 11 p.m. The moment she left British airspace, every light went off. No navigation lights, no cockpit lights, nothing. She flew by moonlight and memory. The English Channel took 20 minutes to cross. Then she was over France, enemy territory. If her engine failed, she'd crash in a country that wanted her dead. If she got lost, she'd run out of fuel over Germany. If she flew too high, radar would spot her. If she flew too low, she'd hit a tree or a building. Mary flew at 200 feet, low enough to avoid radar, high enough to see landmarks. She followed rivers and roads, using her map and a tiny red-filtered flashlight. No GPS, no radio contact, just her eyes and her training. After 90 minutes, she found the field. 3 flashlights on the ground blinked a code. 1 long, 2 short. That was the signal. Mary circled once. She checked for German vehicles. Nothing. She lined up for landing. The field was maybe 400 yards long, surrounded by trees on 3 sides, a road on the 4th. If she overshot, she'd crash into the forest. If she landed short, she'd hit the trees at the approach end. Mary cut the throttle. The Lysander dropped. She touched down perfectly. The plane rolled to a stop in less than 300 feet. Before the propeller stopped spinning, 2 men jumped out. A 3rd man climbed in. No words were spoken. No lights were used. The whole exchange took 90 seconds. Mary turned the plane around, pushed the throttle forward, and was airborne again in under 2 minutes. She was back over the English Channel before the Germans even knew she'd been there. That was mission number 1. Mary would fly this exact scenario 199 more times over the next 3 years. But it got harder every single time. The Germans weren't stupid. They knew someone was landing agents in France. They just couldn't figure out how. They set up more patrols. They installed searchlights near suspected landing zones. They even planted fake resistance members who tried to lure SOE planes into traps. The Nazis were hunting for the ghost, and Mary kept slipping through their fingers. Her 23rd mission almost killed her. It was November 1942, northern France near the Belgian border. The field was smaller than usual. The resistance reported German patrols nearby but said the mission was critical. 3 agents needed extraction immediately. They'd been compromised. If Mary didn't get them out tonight, the Gestapo would have them by morning. She took off at midnight. The weather was terrible. Low clouds, rain, wind gusting to 30 miles per hour. Most pilots would have turned back. Mary kept going. She found the field but couldn't see the ground clearly through the rain. The flashlight signals were dim and hard to spot. She circled twice. On the 3rd pass, she committed to landing. The Lysander hit hard. Too hard. The landing gear groaned but held. She taxied to the pickup point. The 3 agents ran to the plane. They were covered in mud and blood. One had been shot in the leg. They climbed in anyway. Mary turned to take off. That's when she saw the headlights. German trucks. 2 of them. coming down the road toward the field. They were maybe 800 yards away, maybe less. Mary didn't panic. She pushed the throttle to full power. The Lysander lurched forward. The truck saw her. Soldiers jumped out and started shooting. Bullets snapped past the wings. One hit the tail. Another punched through the fuselage. But the Lysander was already moving too fast. Mary pulled back on the stick. The plane lifted off with maybe 50 feet of field to spare. She banked hard left, staying low, using the tree line for cover. The Germans kept shooting, but they were firing blind. By the time they got their spotlights aimed, Mary was gone, disappeared into the night like a ghost. She flew back to England with a bullet hole in the tail and another in the fuselage. The 3 agents survived. One would become a key resistance leader. Another would help coordinate the D-Day invasion. The third would save dozens of Allied pilots shot down over France. Mary never learned their names. She wasn't supposed to need to know the basis. She just flew the missions, one after another after another. By 1943, Mary had completed over 100 missions. The SOE called her the most reliable pilot in the entire organization. Other pilots crashed. Other pilots got captured. Other pilots refused to fly certain missions because they were too dangerous. Mary flew them all. She never refused a mission. Not once. Even when the odds were terrible. Even when other pilots said it was suicide. If the resistance needed her, she went. The Germans started calling her Nacht Gespenst, the night ghost. They knew someone was landing planes in occupied France, but they couldn't catch her. They'd set up ambushes. She'd land somewhere else. They'd increase patrols. She'd fly a different route. They'd monitor radio frequencies. She didn't use a radio. Mary was always one step ahead, always invisible, always gone before they arrived. Her 147th mission was the closest call. June 1944. Just after D-Day, the Germans were paranoid and angry. Allied forces had landed in Normandy and the Nazis knew the French resistance was helping them. They set up checkpoints everywhere. They increased patrols tenfold. They watched every field that could possibly be a landing zone. Landing agents now weren't just dangerous. It was nearly impossible. But the SOE had a team trapped behind German lines. They had vital intelligence about German defenses. If Mary didn't extract them, that intelligence would die with them. She took off at 2 a.m. The field was in central France, deep in German-controlled territory, further than she'd ever flown. Her Lysander didn't have enough fuel for a round trip. The plan was to land, refuel from hidden supplies the resistance had buried, then fly back. But when Mary arrived, the field was wrong. The flashlight signals were in the wrong pattern. One long, one short, one long. That wasn't the code. The correct code was 2 long, 1 short. Someone had compromised the mission. The Germans were waiting. Mary didn't land. She circled once and left. She flew to a backup field 20 miles away. No signals there. No nothing. Just an empty field. But Mary knew the resistance was somewhere nearby. She landed anyway. She sat in the dark cockpit for 15 minutes, waiting. Finally, 3 figures emerged from the trees. They'd seen her circle the first field. They knew she'd figured out the trap. They'd run 20 miles through German-occupied countryside to reach the backup field. Mary got them out. She flew home on fumes. The fuel gauge showed empty when she landed at Tangmere. The engine died 30 seconds after she cut the throttle. By September 1944, Mary had flown 180 missions. The war was turning. Allied forces were pushing into France. The resistance was growing bolder. But the missions weren't getting easier. They were getting more desperate. The Germans were retreating but fighting harder. They knew they were losing. That made them more dangerous, not less. Every mission now felt like flying into a hornet's nest. But Mary kept flying. She had a job to finish. Her 200th and final mission was in March 1945. Germany was collapsing but still fighting. The mission was to extract a British intelligence officer who'd been operating in Germany itself. Not France. Germany. Behind the actual German border. The field was near Munich, surrounded by German military bases. The chances of success were maybe 20%, maybe less. Mary took the mission anyway. She'd flown 199 missions. She wasn't going to stop at 199. The flight took 3 hours, most of it over enemy territory. Mary flew at treetop level the entire way. German radar was useless that low, but the risk of hitting something was massive. One mistake and she'd slam into a hillside or a radio tower. She found the field. It was tiny, maybe 300 yards long, trees on all sides, mountains in the background. The landing approach was terrifying even for Mary. She came in steep, cut the engine at the last second, and dropped like a rock. The Lysander hit hard but stayed in one piece. The intelligence officer was waiting. He climbed in. Mary was wheeled up in under 90 seconds. She flew back to England at full speed, using every trick she'd learned in 3 years of covert ops. She landed at Tangmere just after dawn. That was Mission 200. Mary Wilkins had delivered or extracted over 400 agents. She'd flown into Nazi-occupied territory 200 times. She'd been shot at, hunted, and nearly killed. And she'd never been caught. Not once. When the war ended 6 weeks later, Mary was quietly discharged from the SOE. No medals, no ceremony, no recognition. Her missions were classified. Her name was scrubbed from official records. The British government didn't acknowledge female combat pilots. Mary went back to civilian life. She worked as a flying instructor. She never talked about the war. When people asked what she did, she said she delivered mail. It wasn't until 1998, over 50 years later, that the SOE files were declassified. Historians started piecing together the truth. Mary Wilkins had flown more covert missions than any other pilot in World War II. Male or female, she had a 100% success rate. 200 missions, 0 failures, 0 casualties among her passengers, 0 times captured. The Night Ghost was real, and she was a 26-year-old woman from Yorkshire who was told she couldn't fly combat missions. Other pilots from that era praised her when the truth came out. One said, "I flew maybe a dozen of those missions and I was terrified every time. Mary flew 200 and made it look easy." Another said, "She was the best pilot I ever knew, better than any man in the RAF. And we all knew it. We just couldn't say it at the time." Mary Wilkins died in 2007 at the age of 90. By then, her story was finally public. Schools taught about her. Historians wrote about her. The RAF officially recognized her contributions. But Mary never sought the spotlight. When reporters asked her about being a hero, she'd say, "I just did my job. A lot of people did a lot more than I did." When they asked how she flew 200 missions without getting caught, she'd smile and say, "I was lucky, but it wasn't luck. It was a skill. It was courage. It was 200 nights of perfect flying in impossible conditions. It was one woman proving that gender didn't matter when lives were on the line." Here's the number that says it all. The SOE flew approximately 400 covert missions into occupied Europe between 1942 and 1945. Mary Wilkins flew half of them. One pilot, half the missions. And she never lost a single agent to capture during a flight. Not one. Other pilots had a failure rate around 15%. Some missions went wrong. Some agents got caught. Some pilots got shot down. Mary's failure rate was 0%. 200 missions. 200 successes. Thanks for watching this incredible story of courage and skill. Next time we're covering how one engineer's illegal modification turned the PG-51 Mustang into an unstoppable killing machine. If you want more untold stories of World War II heroes who changed history, hit that subscribe button right now. These are the stories they don't teach in school. These are the stories that deserve to be remembered. See you in the next one.